Hi guys, welcome to our February panel discussion on consistency and staff training. We have three great panelists to discuss this topic with us today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, starting with Lior.
Hi, I'm Lior, as Courtney said. Um, I'm from Seville, Spain, and I'm the supervisor for four hostels in Andalusia called Grupo IN, which is in Cadiz, Seville, and Granada.
Okay, thanks.
Next.
Juliana?
What's that?
I was moving on to Juliana.
Hi, I'm Juliana. I'm from Cluj-Napoca, Romania. I run Transylvania Hostel for the last 7 years. So I'm owner slash manager.
Awesome, thank you. And go.
Hey, I'm Gal from Jerusalem, Abraham Hostel Jerusalem. Co-founder, originally set up the hostel and managed it together with our tours company. I now focus mostly on our ever-growing tour activity and also on our next Tel Aviv expansion, which we hope to have open by the end of this year.
Awesome, thank you. My name's Courtney. I'm the moderator for these discussions. I'm the current manager at Pacific Tradewinds Hostel in San Francisco, and I also work for hostelmanagement.com, writing the blog, doing different side projects, including these discussions. So we'll get right in with our first question. Does your hostel have a high turnover staff, especially or specifically with travelers from other areas? And if so, how do you deal with this constant staff training of new people who aren't from there? Gal, do you want to take this first?
Sure. I don't know to say if it's a high turnover. It's fairly relative. I think trying to think about it this morning. I think our managers, department managers, because we're a fairly large hostel, stay quite a long time for several years. Our reception managers been there from the beginning, 4 years now. Our other shift staff change over more frequently. I think on average maybe a year and a half. And we have had staff go off to school and come back and things like that, which are encouraging for us. Yeah, so we regarding people from out of the country that come in and maybe don't stay for that long, we don't have that so much with the staff because it's difficult to hire people from who are not residents or citizens of Israel, but we get that with our volunteer staff naturally.
Okay.
They change over. We also require them to stay for a minimum few months, but it's not very long.
And how do you deal, I guess, more specifically then with the volunteer staff, since they're usually from somewhere else and are a quicker turnover? How do you deal with constant staff training with them or volunteer training with them?
Yeah, we have a kind of a SOP, which is a standard operating procedure. When they get in, they go over it. It covers everything. Actually, I'll take a step back. I think the key is in the screening. We have a pretty rigorous screening process when we can afford it, when we have enough volunteers set up ahead of time. And we talk to them and we send them expectations, and we have a code of conduct kind of document that we get them to look at, which kind of matches expectations as in what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. So that's the most important part. Then we, when they arrive, they go over the manual, then they do a couple of observation shifts, and then they start. And we have one of our managers, our food and beverage manager, and our bar manager. She manages our hostel volunteer team, and just keeps things going on a weekly basis. Has meetings with them and makes sure everything is okay. And the tours department, which is a little bit unrelated to hostel, but we have that in our hostel. We have other volunteers, and they mostly deal with media. So we screen them to make sure they're good photographers or video editors and know social media, and they do a lot of that for us.
Awesome, thank you. That's great. Juliana, do you want to go next? Oh, I think you're on mute still.
Yes. Hi. So we have also high turnover. We also hire just people from the city, from Romania, or the people that have the legal right to work with us. We had also international travelers, but again, they had to be out of European Union to be able to work. We have a high turnover because we are a smaller hospital, so we don't have positions uh, like intermediate stages where they can grow. And our staff is young and dynamic, and they want to develop, and they're very curious to discover the world, to meet the people. But after a while, they feel that they need to grow. So we are trying to find a way to give them opportunities to develop themselves and to keep it interesting for them. Um, so we don't have volunteers. We don't do volunteers. It's not legal in our country to do so.
How long do your staff usually stay for?
We have staff that stay 3 months, and we have staff that stay 2 years. But I would say they stay about 6, 7 months in average, and that's a little bit a lot because we invest a lot of training in them. We try to select, as you were asking before, Gal. Our trial is very very difficult for them. We have a questionnaire before even inviting them to interview with us, so that we see exactly how they think and if they would choose us. And so very few people get to us to
You
interview.
require meeting them in person first, or do you take people over email or Skype or?
We ask for their CV and a letter of recommendation or intention, what they want to do, and then we have a questionnaire that's personalized for our hospital, so that we ask them if they have the legal right to work with us or why they want to work with us, and a few tests to see how they think and how they react in certain situations. And based on that, we select the people that we will invite for the interview. And normally we invite them in person, not over Skype.
Okay,
You can meet
great,
them back here.
cool, thank you. Lior?
I knew it was going to be my turn next. Uh, I, we're about the same lines of as Gal. We have our reception staff and cleaning staff that's a lower turnover. It's probably around 1 to 2 years. And then we have our volunteer staff, and they rotate on a monthly basis. We actually have a month stay minimum and maximum. For the really good ones, we might extend a little bit more, but we like that rotation of staff for the volunteers because they just really create atmosphere in the hostel. And they do help us out with tasks like cleaning beds and things like that, but we keep it to a minimum so that the consistency is better focused on with the more permanent staff. And so we don't want them to stay too much or too long because there's a burnout factor as well, living in a dorm room with the same people for over a month. As I said, if all goes well, then maybe we have them stay a little bit longer. So the training obviously is very important after the selection and hiring. The training is very important, and like I said, we keep it to a minimum of tasks that they do so that it's easier to follow up on. We have somebody in charge of them. Same with Gal's Hostel, and then follow up on their activities. That's really important, and they need to know that they're not staff. They are staying for free. They're guests, that we give them their free bed in exchange for some help, and that the customers know that as well, so that if a customer is talking with them up on the terrace, or they're up there having fun and they say, where's the nearest ATM? And the person just arrived, they say, oh, you know what, I don't really work here, but the reception staff is really well informed on everything in the city, and to ask the reception staff.
Okay, so you actually make it a point to have a distinction between the two for that reason.
That's correct. Obviously, the customers see them going around and cleaning their beds and doing things, but it's pretty obvious that the reception staff there that is at the entrance, the customers see them as they walk in and out, that they are the staff, and the volunteers need to know that differentiation and how to communicate that to the customer.
Okay, great. Do any of you guys, I think, Gal, you may have said yes, do you do weekly staff meetings or monthly staff meetings, and do you do those with paid staff and volunteers, or just paid staff, or what do you do with that? Juliana?
We have a meeting every 2 weeks where we discuss like the problems or challenges that we had in the past 2 weeks. It's basically we use the time to have a sort of training meeting to remind them of the things that they need to improve. And in the same time, we come up with suggestions of things that we can do better. We are continuously trying to find ways of improving the hostel, but we bring the input of the staff as well because they have the first-hand interaction with the guests, the feedback, and they can also tell us what would make their life easier and less stressful.
Okay, awesome. Gal, you said you do meetings, correct?
Got to remember to unmute. Yeah, we do meetings for volunteer staff. They have a weekly meeting with a relevant volunteer coordinator, depending on the department. For other departments, it's per need. On average, I'd say departments meet once a month, whether it's the bar, the reception, the tourist department, cleaning and housekeeping. But it's based on need. If there's something exciting going on, then we do it. As the owners and general managers, we try to meet with our manager staff only about once a month, and just go over what's going on in different departments and what's coming up, so that we can inform the department managers to have meetings with their staff, and we brainstorm stuff. And yeah, it's very important once in a while to kind of do that. I'm very fond of doing that if it's not strictly a work kind of meeting, and there's also some brainstorming involved outside of the hostel setting, because then there are not things going on all the time, and we can get out of it a little bit. It's nice to break the routine a little bit as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Leor?
We do a monthly staff meeting for the regular staff, and depending on the needs of the hostel at the time, we might focus that on specific items, or we might just go out and have fun, get to know each other, and build the atmosphere within the team. And the volunteer staff meets once every 2 weeks, roughly. That way that, as I said, they have a 1 month stay, so they will have 2 meetings within their time. We don't find it as important, but it's a good way for them to kind of start talking about the hostel and how to better improve it. We get good ideas from them, and we keep it short, just to an hour. Something really more along the lines of getting them to talk to each other and to give us feedback on how the program's working and what we can do to improve the hostel.
Awesome. We just started doing weekly team meetings about a month and a half ago, and it's been really great. And one thing we started doing, because for us it's kind of the same thing of getting them cohesive and talking about ideas together and things like that, we started doing thorns and roses, which is a little cheesy, but they actually really love it. Everyone goes around and says something that was a thorn for the day and a rose for the day, so positive, negative. We started doing it at staff dinner as well for the day, and then at the weekly meeting for the whole week. And it often brings up funny stories from the hostel, and it's really worked to kind of bring this staff meeting from just being of like a boring, okay, here's what's going on, to kind of a fun family meeting. So I've definitely noticed for us a difference in consistency of what's going on, of being able to talk about things, but also of bringing everyone together. So I think they're great. As far as once you've done training, what does your hostel do in terms of systems and procedures that are put in place to allow consistent staff experience? So, of course, at the beginning, you're going to train them on how your PMS system works and how different things go. But what do you do about always being able to offer a consistent experience? Gal, do you want to take that one first?
Sure, yeah. Very early into setting up, I put in place these 2 systems, basically. Google Docs, very simple. One I mentioned earlier is the SOP, and it got written. The operating procedure got written as we were setting up. So when we picked a PMS, we included instructions on that and some screenshots, and then regular procedures in opening a shift and closing a shift, etc. And that's been very rigorously kept updated, so that when a new staff member comes in, then it's all there. And they can go over the theory, and then they see the practice, and they're usually in charge as well of updating it. If there's things that have changed and updated that in the way we do things in practice, then they are the first to notice because they've just gone over the theory. The other form we have is called a frequently asked questions document, and it's online as well. And any reoccurring questions, like the main questions, the basic ones are all in there. And then if a staff member ever gets asked a question that they didn't know and they researched and found out, they add it. And the most important and useful document that we have is called a logbook. And again, it's a Google document where the staff member puts their name, what they want to communicate, who they want to communicate it to, and then if there's anything that's been done to follow up, there's a last column. And that gets used very often. Different departments have different logbooks, and everyone's shared on. So I can put, one of the tour staff member can put something in the reception logbook to say, this tour has been canceled, please be aware, so that the reception staff is aware as well. And that's basically our most frequently used tool. That's where all the communication gets done, and that's how we keep track of things going on. If there's something going on in a room, if there's an event, if there's a guest we need to get a hold of to give a message, it all goes in there. And when staff do handover between shifts, then they go over the logbook together and say, yeah, oh, this is something that's happened, this you should know about, this still needs to be taken care of. And those are the systems we have in place. For consistency, I was trying to think about that. Really, no golden sort of solution. It's mostly management, sort of supervising constantly and seeing that things are up to par and that everyone's doing a consistent job. And we follow reviews closely. So if something pops up in a review, an online review, then we know to fix it.
So kind of following those procedures you've put in place, if they're consistently followed, you have consistency basically.
Yeah, daily grind of making sure everyone's doing their work.
Yeah, fair. Lior?
I think after proper training, the next step really is follow up, and that's the most important part. So as Gal said, the management needs to ensure they follow up on a regular basis, and we also have checklists that they have to follow, and in there we can write a little bit of specifics of things that are not usually consistent or that we have trouble in keeping consistent, and we follow up on those checklists as well. And I think that's the key there, is just making sure to follow up, personally watching the people, how they work, how they interact, and how they follow up with your company's standards.
Awesome. Juliana, do you have anything you want to add to that one?
We also have a logbook that's in Google Docs, and every time they come into shift, they need to sign that they read it. What else? We do have also a Facebook group just for the staff where they can communicate, and we have a task list for every shift.
Have a what?
We have a task list, like with the things that they need to do in order to make sure that the hostel runs smoothly. And of course, we have the procedures that are in place to provide the consistency of what they know and what they do. And in addition to that, we have an assistant manager that makes sure that everything gets done. So we don't, as it was said before, we follow up on them. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. As a side note to that question, you've all mentioned things that have worked really well for you or that are currently working well to keep things running smoothly. What are some things that maybe you've tried in the past that didn't work so well, or just some kind of negative experience that you've learned from in that regard? Do you have anything, Liliana?
Negative experience regarding, can
Um,
you
yeah, basically, as far as staff training or putting procedures in place or anything along what we've talked about already, is there anything that you tried that didn't work out so well, or that you discovered maybe wasn't the best way to go?
okay. Just telling them theory and not letting them actually do the thing is not very well because they don't remember. So what we try to do is to teach them the theory and then make a simulation in the training so that they see exactly how it feels to make those things. Like for example, the check-in procedure. We give them the document to read, then we go through and explain it to them. Then we make a simulation between us, like not with the guest that is involved. And in the end, we go and we we let them do a check-in with the guest, but under supervision before we throw them into the ocean to swim, basically by themselves. What I wanted to mention before is that we try to teach them the principles that we have in running the hostel, so that our staff can take their own decisions without having to ask all the time. Because the procedure is something standard for standard situations, but in a hostel there's always something different. So if they can take a decision by themselves, it's the best for everyone. It's the quickest way. So yeah, for us, it's very important for them to understand our philosophy and the way we think in the hostel.
Okay, awesome. Gal, what about you? Is there anything you guys tried that you just thought this is not the right way to go?
I'm sure there's plenty. Haven't been able to come up with one this morning yet. I think generally not to give tasks that are super complicated and to shift staff and try to have the complicated stuff be with the regular, fully employed there every day kind of staff. And I agree with Liliana, is basically teaching the principles. And then based on that, those are the tools they can make good decisions with, and back them up on it. If they made a bad decision that they can explain what the rationale was and they learn from, great. So I don't remember anything specific that we've tried. Nothing comes to mind. I'm sure there have been, but we try to fix them quickly.
Yeah, fair. And Leo, do you have anything that just totally tanked and didn't work that you tried?
Being that I'm the one that makes up the procedures, everything works.
Obvious.
No, like Al, it's kind of hard to think of what didn't work in the past. If it didn't work, I'm pretty sure that you found out right away and they changed it. So it's easier to think about the things that do work because it's long lasting.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of something that we tried in respects to consistency that didn't work.
Okay.
Can't really think of it.
Just in case we could help anyone from crashing and burning. I think I've personally learned what you guys have all mentioned is that follow-up tends to be the most important beyond just training and theory. It does no good if you're not making sure it's working. So I've definitely echoed that with all of you. We had a question tweeted in. It was, do any of you hostel managers do individual one-on-one training or evaluations of your staff, or is it always in a group? Anyone want to take that one first?
I'll take one.
Go.
Oh.
You want to go, Lior? Go ahead.
Just because I just finished 5 days of 14-hour trainings.
You finished 5 days of sleep.
What's that?
It looks like you just got out of 5 days of sleep.
I needed it. Thanks. We always do one-on-one training. We never do it in a group. Every person has their own learning curve and their own way of learning, what works better for them. And also some people take longer than others. And we tailor it to each person, obviously following the manual, the SOP, and the training materials. I've actually just recently done a couple of trainings of reception staffs in some of the cities out of need, but generally I don't do that. I pass that on to the most experienced receptionist in the best turns possible or shifts possible, starting off with the easier shifts and then moving on to the more difficult ones, if that helps.
Gal?
Yeah, we always start off, thank you, with individual training. I mean, people start at different times, and it's very rare that two staff members start at the same time so that they're kind of at the same point. Once the staff member completes our rigorous training program, screening and then training, and exam, then they're qualified. They start working shifts, and then we touch up. At that point, it basically turns to group training because we assume everyone's on par. But if there's individual things, then we, the relevant manager makes sure to sort of touch up with a specific staff member on what they're lacking. But so personal training, once they're qualified, they move to a general staff training unless there's anything unusual.
Juliana?
We tried both. We tried to train them in a group, and we found out that telling them about general stuff is fine, but when it comes to giving personal attention, always better the one-on-one training. And regarding the evaluations, we after they work for a few months with us, we have a one-on-one session where we get together and we discuss about how they feel in the hospital with their job. Um, they have the opportunity to give us feedback, and we have the opportunity to give them feedback. Um, After a one-on-one or evaluation, we don't really call it that way. It's always we come out with a stronger bond with our staff and a clearer vision on both sides of what's going on.
And who do you have train your staff one-on-one? Do you have an experienced receptionist, or do you or Brian do it, or who's in charge?
We are all involved actually. Each of us has a part that we are training on. Of course, we could switch, but we have specialized areas, each of us, and we try to bring in the receptionist, the more experienced receptionist, because that reminds them of how important it is to do certain aspects of their job, and because they explain it to other people, they understand it themselves much better, and they remind it themselves. So I think it's good to bring receptionists that are working there for a while in the training.
Yeah, definitely. I tend to notice that using receptionists, sorry, I just realized my camera's off. Hopefully get it back on. There we go. That using receptionists is sometimes better than myself because they're more in tune with the everyday workings of reception than I am. And they understand, I've been doing this for so long, I don't remember what it was like to first learn that, where it's much fresher in their memory and in which ways it's confusing at the beginning. So I find that they're a lot better to train the newer staff. So I'm like, by all means, take it away. So, but try to stay involved as well. Does anyone have anything else to add to that question?
I think it's also having an experienced staff train a new person helps refresh their old habits, maybe that have died. So they have to go over the training materials, and then also when the management follows up on the new staff, they might see something that was mistrained or missed, and that way they can make sure they follow up with both staff.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. See what's going on. I think it's also maybe less intimidating for them to ask questions as well, because they can ask more of a peer than someone above them and feel more comfortable.
I wanted to ask Gal about his test from the end of the training. That sounds very interesting. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, the tests usually include. So what we do is at the end of the training, we have I don't remember, maybe 30 questions that we usually ask and that touch on different topics of the work, and we give the trainee the questions ahead of time, just so that, I mean, it's a tool for them to see that they've gone over the different elements, that in the training process we haven't missed anything, or circumstantially something didn't take place in the shifts that they were training in, that they still are aware of what needs to happen, what they need to do if it happens in a future shift that they do, even if they haven't had experience before. So they get all the questions. In the test, we choose, I don't, depends between the departments, changes, but say 10 of the 30 questions, just to make sure that they've gone over them. And then and then at the end of the test, we simply sit down with them, and we go over it verbally. We ask the question, and they answer what they wrote, or we go over what they wrote, and we see if it was on the ball, or if there was something small missing, or if there was significantly something missing, and then we know where we need to revisit with them in training, and at that point they don't pass the exam. So that's the way we do it. It's not you know, a full-on certification exam where we try to grill them and make them nervous. It's really to make sure that they've gone through everything, and if they don't qualify to start working then and need a little bit more training, that they understand that as well. It's not just because we said so. It's because they now realize, oh yeah, there's something I'm still missing. It's better for me to know that before I start my own shifts, so that I don't, I'm not on the spot if this comes up. That's more or less how it works.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I can send you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm gonna start implementing that now.
We are going to look into it.
I can send you, an
You want to go to
example.
Romania? Sorry, go ahead.
I'm just saying I can send you guys an example of the exams we have, and you can take a look and maybe adapt it if it's useful.
That would be fantastic, because we are just making training and recruitment, so it would be awesome.
Sure.
I'd like it as well.
You'd like one as well.
I kind of do an oral test, kind of similar to what you're talking about. I'll ask the question and see what they say, and then kind of go over it with them. But I think that's a lot better, because you kind of give them the chance to answer first and then go through it all at the end. So.
Yeah.
Courtney said oral.
Oh, Courtney. Courtney, it's morning for us here. You have to be gentle.
I'll do my best. No promises. All right. Next question. You guys kind of answered this one already, but basically a good hostel will have procedures in place for all the usual things that come up. But what systems do you have in place to ensure that changing information or information that will continually be changed is shared? So, like Gal, you mentioned you have a Google Doc that's kind of a communication log, that if anything's changing. Do you guys have any other kinds of things that you make sure, a rate's changed, or something's canceled, or some kind of procedure's changed? Oh, we used to do the linens this way, and now we're going to do it that way. How do you make sure everyone's on the same page? Lior, would you like to give us an auditory answer?
Sure.
He calls
Sure.
them personally and tells them all one by one.
Yeah, in each hostel. Communication is obviously very important there. We have a logbook as well. We do it on paper. I like the idea of having it online, but we haven't tried it yet, and I find paper to be very effective still. And then we have a memo binder, so information that's like, if it's a procedure change that we send out by email, we print it up and put it. Oh, we're really not green. We make sure that it's there for everybody to read.
You're also really
We'll
not 21st century. But.
Yeah, we're old school here in Spain.
I want to recommend you to go with Google Docs, even though somebody snuck us to notice you're anti-Google, but we're not going to tell you. But I'll tell you what the advantage from a managerial perspective is. You can read it at home. You don't have to find the little piece of paper, and when someone's training, then you send them a link to it, and they go over at least a year back on the logbook to see what's come up and what they can learn from the way it was resolved. So you can sit in your bed and look at the different logbooks and see if there's anything you'd like to comment on.
So then you can really work 24/7.
Or you can send them a little pigeon with a little note of paper, and that works.
Yeah.
Oh.
I think Gal, sorry, on that front as well, Gal, it's true that if I can read it, I think we condition our staff that I will be reading it, that I'll be working 24 hours, and that they can communicate with me that way, which happens. And so when there's a problem, they don't pick up the phone and call when they really should. I just had a recent case where there was a really bad customer experience, and they wrote me while I was on my 2 days off, and it was the 2 days that I really needed to disconnect and not do anything. And they never picked up the phone to make sure that I'm aware of this and deal with it. So I found myself on my day back with a situation that was already passed, and I couldn't help them with it. Not to say that a logbook virtually would cause that, but I'd have to be very careful to differentiate between what should be communicated on that. That's why we have the logbook on paper that I don't need to read, because it's something for the receptionists internally that are working on that shift. Obviously, if I come in to cover a shift, or if I need it for whatever reason, I will pick up that logbook and I will read it to know what the current situation is. And then the communication within ourselves is more through email with me and the staff. But yeah, I really do like the Google app idea. It actually would help us out a lot. So as I was saying, with respect to communication is very important with the log, whether you do it online, virtually, or on paper, and the communication of memos, and that the staff read it before their shift, not during their shift. And that's the struggle that you have, is when people start their shift right away, they tend to get distracted with the day-by-day events, and then something like a rate change or something even more important, it doesn't get handled, or the staff needs to be aware of it before they start. And updating your training material if something has changed, so that changes the communication with the new staff that comes in. That's pretty much what we do for communication, to make sure that the unexpected or the changes gets communicated.
Is you hammer in hieroglyphics and
he ingrains it in the desk when they come in.
Lior, a couple things to what you said. We use Google Docs as well. We have two different ones. One is the shift log that's more for just reception, and then one is a general log that's things to me specifically, and then I can respond to them specifically. With those notes, when I put a note on there, I ask each of them to initial after that they've read it. That way I can go back and see, okay, this person still hasn't seen this yet. But I have the same problem where I've had the issue where something gets written on there, I don't find out about it right away, and I ask, well, why didn't I know about this? Oh, I wrote it in the log, assuming that 24/7 I'm reading this log. So it is tricky with that, about differentiating, but even having two different logs has helped with that, about what's kind of just day-to-day reception and what goes to me. We also have that every time the computer gets turned on in the morning, it automatically opens to Gmail, our PMS, and the staff log. The Google Doc opens automatically. So it kind of helps them to remember, hey, I need to read this right away, which may help if you decide to go digital and join the rest of us.
We will go digital.
You can tell them that if it's for you and not for each other, Lior, then they need to email you to tell you they put something in there for you, because you don't read it all the time. So that's just a way to make sure that that's not an excuse for them. Say it's in there.
Unless you're not checking email at all, then tell them to call you.
Unless you don't use email, Lior. And then they could just snail mail
On
you.
his digital detox days, he's not using email.
I've got 600 emails in my inbox. You want to see it?
That's why you should use it.
Teasing you. Get over it.
No, but I think the important thing I was trying to stress there is that to know when to email me or the manager or whoever is responsible, or when to call if something's urgent enough to call. And sometimes they don't see that something's urgent, or they don't see it as important when really it is. They don't know. they don't have enough experience to differentiate when it's really needed for them to initiate a call to have action right away on the problem.
So that's a great question. How do you guys train staff on when to know something's actually urgent and they need to call versus send an email or a staff log or deal with this later tonight? Do you have a system in place, or do you just expect them to kind of judge the situation?
We have them kind of judge the situation, and it's a learning curve after you give them enough times because they didn't call you, or because they're calling you about things that don't make any sense, or that they don't need to call you for that, or they're not as important. It's just a learning curve. They learn, and I'm okay with that. Just as long as I give them the feedback and the follow up, and the managers as well. They don't need to be on the phone 24 hours a day. So we just ask them if it's not important. We'll ask them if this is something they could have emailed us. But on the other hand, if they just email us and don't call us, then we try to make sure we train them, or that we make them see that this should have been a phone call. It's something more important, where the priorities lie. But there's obviously no checklist that you can say, if this happens, call. If this happens, write.
Yeah.
If this happens, call. It would be infinite.
Agree. Gal, do you have a certain way that you kind of explain what to call and what not, or is it same thing, just situational learning curve?
Yeah, it's got to be common sense. If the person doesn't have that, then they're not going to last long.
Have you discovered common sense is not so common?
Yeah, so initially, it's not universal to everyone. So initially, we encourage them to not be afraid and call and ask, and it's okay. And it doesn't, it's okay if we're interrupted. That's part of our work. When they call, usually if they present a situation, I ask them what they think the solution should be, and if they get it, then great. I encourage them and say, yeah, that's what you should do, and it's okay that you called me, but in the future, if this comes up, if it's the exact situation, then you can do that. And if it's not, then I tell them what they should do and why. And I think after a few times like that, then more or less you pick up if they get it, and they pick up your expectations. And if not, then they're not the right employee.
You raised a great point about when they asking them what they would do, giving them the chance to tell you what they think the answer is. I think that's a great training tool, rather than just telling them. Encourages them to think.
Often I find that occasionally, not often, I find that I would have done something a certain way, but the suggestion that they come up with is actually brilliant and maybe better. And so it's a good opportunity to also, for me as a manager, to feed off their good ideas.
Totally. Juliana, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, maybe we give them examples of clear situations when they should call us. For example, we have controls from different people in the state, different organizations, let's call them like that. That's when they should definitely let us know right away and drop everything, because it's not something that they can go with. Otherwise, it's common sense. We also encourage them to think and come up with solutions, and just check with us if they're good or not. Otherwise, it's rather crazy with phone calls and little information details that they could have come up with by themselves.
Okay, perfect. I love getting the phone calls early in the morning with things they could have figured out themselves. And I said, well, what do you think? And I'm like, that's exactly right. It's 7 a.m.
Okay. We have an assistant manager that they should call first, if otherwise, so that just the most important ones comes up.
I need one of those. You take the early morning shift. All right. About staff training with local knowledge. This is something I've noticed as both a traveler and as watching receptionists who are new. Guests tend to see hostel staff as their source of local knowledge, whether that person's been there 10 days or 10 years. So what type of training do you give in this regard? So not hostel specific like PMS systems, but about your area, about logistics, anything that's not hostel specific. Do you guys have tips, tricks, cheat sheets? What do you do that works well? Lior? Or Gal, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think I mentioned earlier we have a frequently asked questions thing that we use and we update. The most frequent ones, we also produce our little city map of our surrounding, and we put it on the back of that so that they, you know, because the ones that come up, how do we get to the airport, how do we get to the old city, ATMs, that's all on printed and available for them when they check in. They get it in hand. For example, we're very much into tours, so we make sure our receptionists, obviously our tour staff go on all our tours as part of their training, receptionists as well, especially the common ones, so that they can answer on it firsthand. And we do emphasize hiring locals, not just, I mean, again, it's difficult to hire non-locals from a visa perspective, but also there's an added value for the traveler that it's somebody from the area, speaks the language, grew up there or is studying there, knows their way around.
Awesome. Juliana?
What we do, of course, hire the locals or people that lived in the city for a while. It's also very important for us for them to be people that enjoy going out, to enjoy the nightlife, because that's one of our main attractions here. And we also, when they check in, we have a map of the city, or where we give them information about what they could do in the city. So right away, everybody gets ideas of what to do in the city. They don't have to look on the wall. They have it next to the map, so they carry it in their pocket.
Perfect. All right. Lior?
What was the question again? No. We also do the map, and during our training, they obviously get to know the basics of what the guest is looking for, where to show it on the map, and kind of do a tour of the city. The more unexpected things or more uncommon things, like where to get a good haircut, things like that, usually that will take time for them to get to know all that information, and it's just a learning curve. The customer doesn't really mind us Googling the information to find out where it is if somebody's new in the city, but we do also try to hire people that they don't have to be local, but it's better if they've been in the city for a few months now, know the local transportation. Usually we don't do interviews with people out of the country to bring them in right away to start working, although we have done that. And in that case, we do make sure that they go on the tours, that they have all the information that they need, the basic information. And then when somebody comes with a very odd question, it's usually not a problem that we find that information out for them. We never tell them we don't know. It's actually in our training material to not use Google it as an answer, but to do that ourselves.
You don't want to give them let me Google that for you.com? You've never seen them?
No.
All right. Awesome. As far as atmosphere in your hostel, it can really ebb and flow depending on the current guest, the season, you know, all kinds of different factors. How important and what do you do for consistency in that aspect? So obviously you have procedures in place for good customer service and things like that, but how do you keep things consistent across all different changing factors? Lior, you want to
go? For us, atmosphere is actually the most important thing in our hostel. We find that the better experience the customer has in mingling with other guests and or doing the activities and having a good time, whether it's a pub crawl or whether it's a tour, that's the most important thing for us to get the customer satisfaction and for them to have a good experience, to recommend us, and that's what we're here for. That does change, so there's no consistency in that. It depends on the season, it depends on the hostel, it depends on your customer base as well. For example, in Granada, weekdays we're full with foreigners from all over the place, and then on the weekends we fill up with Spanish staff that are there for the weekend. In Cadiz, for example, during the summer, everyone's at the beach all day, and they don't even step into the hostel until about 11 o'clock when they want to get ready to go out. And during the low season, when it's cold, they're all inside. So also there's low season, high seasons when we have a full hostel and we don't really need to do anything for atmosphere, although we do activities, it just kind of happens. And the low seasons, we have to focus on having family dinners, even if there's only 5 people, even if we don't make money off it, even if we lose money. It's a way of making that community when there's only 5 people in the hostel. And the activities, like I said, with the different cultures, depends on that. You know, we might in Granada we have a very big Korean following. We have the majority of our guests are Korean in Granada, and we try to tailor the activities to them as well, and make sure that they also have a local experience in the Spanish culture while being respectful of their needs. So it's always a changing topic when it comes to atmosphere, and it's very important to be dynamic and be able to change and not just say, okay, this is our activity, we do this dinner 3 days a week and it stays like this, because things will change and customers will need something different each season or even within the same week.
And it sounds like even though you have 4 hostels that are all part of the same group, that you have quite a different atmosphere in each one. So do you kind of focus on each individual one keeping consistent within itself rather than having a consistent brand?
Maybe that's something that we did try that hasn't worked. It just reminded me. The activities, like I said, they can't be constant, even within the same hostel. Cadiz is a good example because of the beach. You know, you'll have a week where you have certain cultures because they're on vacation and they do stay in the hostel and they do want to do dinners. Or if you do beach events, they will want to go, and that's one way of getting them out there. And then you'll get some weeks where it's just a certain culture that doesn't want to do anything and doesn't want to be involved in activities, or they think that you're pushing them to sell, and so it's better to just not have any activities that week. Also, you can go off the top of your head, you know, depends on the customers that are there. If they ask you something, you know what, you say, you know what, yeah, let's do a dinner tonight. You know, you're asking me where you can get a good paella. There's no good paella in Cadiz. Why don't we make one in the hostel and invite other guests? So I think it needs to be dynamic, the activities, although it is very important to have consistency, and so that the receptionist and guest knows what's happening each day. But you have to also be able to be flexible with that and maybe say dinner, but then change the dinner according to what it is without having to cancel it, or know what your trends are, what cultures are coming in, what seasons are coming in, and how to adapt your activities to them and communicate it ahead of time. Great. But yes, Courtney, it's different between each hostel.
Got it. Juliana, do you have anything you want to add to that? Of your
yeah. For us, it's very important for every traveler to create a connection with somebody. So in low season, we don't have so many people in the hostel, so the staff gets out more and has more time to get involved with guests and in their activities in the city. And in high season, then you step back, you have other things that you have to manage, and there are more people, so you facilitate or give opportunities for people to meet each other and create a connection within travelers.
All right. And go.
Being in Jerusalem, being in Jerusalem, we do have a lot of seasonality in terms of holidays, and different times of the year bring different crowds. Occasionally, some seasons tend to bring a little bit of a slightly wacko crowd, or some seasons bring a more religious kind of crowd. We do have a weekly schedule of events which runs consistently, and also we open up to locals, which also kind of keeps consistency, because the locals and the events stay the same, and the customers visiting are might change, but they then kind of adapt or tune into what's going on. And then we have changing events, concerts, different holidays. We have various theme parties, so that changes. And yeah, as Lyra said, sometimes you can't. It's right to let it morph depending on the kind of crowd that you have. But you know, as a brand, and this is something that we'll need to deal with soon, and we're thinking about what we do in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv being a very different city to Jerusalem. Do we go for kind of a brand consistency, or do we go for a city-specific experience, or a little bit of both? And we'll see. Don't know. Is it Liliana talking?
I don't think anyone's talking right now. Just
Okay, with Brian, I think.
oh, okay. I don't hear anyone.
Yeah. So I guess
All
hopefully that
right.
makes.
Yeah, that's perfect. So we just have a couple minutes left. So I just want to kind of sum up by asking, what is your, if you had to sum up, what's your hostel's purpose or culture? I think what you've all been talking about is you're keeping consistent. Obviously, you have procedures in place. You're keeping consistent the atmosphere by also being dynamic and changing things to always keep to your purpose or your culture. So what is that if you had to define it into one thing? Gal, do you want to start?
Actually, Lior had no idea what that question meant, and and I didn't either. But I'll try to answer something anyway. Um, I mean, I can say when we started up, we came up with this idea that when you're traveling and where you're sleeping, you want to feel a little bit cozy, a little bit like home. If you're out in a crazy city, some different language, you want to come home and feel comfortable. That's what we try to create. And so we have cozy living room-like areas and a big lounge with everything kind of like it would be at home, with a kitchen nearby and the sitting area, and there's a bar which not everyone has at home, but some. And so that's what we try to keep those clean and tidy and inviting. And what and so yeah, that's what we try to do anyway.
All right. Liliana, what are you guys mostly about that you're always striving to keep consistent? What's your atmosphere, your purpose, or your culture?
We try to create a cozy home-like atmosphere. We have lots of couches where people just hang around and sit comfortably. We try to create the social atmosphere where people get to know each other, go out together and explore the city, or they can cook a meal in their kitchen. Um, we we try to party outside of the hostel and leave the hostel for sleeping. Although many times people have the impression we party in the hostel, but that's not true. We we encourage people to have a great time outside of the hostel and to just relax and feel like home after the party in the hostel.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Awesome. And Leor, last and obviously least. You're on mute. There you go.
Well, you just unmuted me, hustle management. Thank you very much. So we focus on two things. One is that we are also, like Juliana said, a family experience. And we keep that very consistent because with our staff, we're a family. We're a very big family, but we're a happy family. And we make sure to pass that on to our guests and make them feel like they're part of the family as well. We do that by communication with them before they come, their experience while they're with us in the activities that we have, and then the post communication that we do with them after that. We try to keep that connection with them and that they're not just a number, they're part of the family. And we also try to make it a Spanish family and make sure that it's a local experience that they have when they come to us. So when I talk about changing activities and things that we do in our hostel, we always try to make sure to focus that as something of a local experience. For example, we have sangria nights. We don't have mojito nights. We leave that for Cuba. And paella nights, not risotto nights. We're not in Italy. So we make sure that the customer, when they come here, has the local experience that they're looking for when they come to Spain, and we try to do that in a family atmosphere. And it's very constant because we make it constant. We make that our focus to every day, every shift.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys very much. We've just hit an hour. So thank you to everyone watching and tweeting in questions, and thank you mostly to our panelists, and we'll see you next month.